one of the smartest things that my dad did for me was when I got out of school and the first year that I worked for him full time, that first year he made me sit in his office. And he said, you're going to be in meetings with me with bankers. You're going to be in meetings with me with insurance people. You're going to be in meetings with me with record company people, with artists, with the musicians. And you're going to sit at the back of the couch and you're not going to say a word because you have one mouth and two ears. And I want you to listen to twice as much as you speak, but I really don't want you to talk. I want you to take in everything that I do and how I interact with these people. And that's what I did literally for a year. That 1 year was a big, big thing that I think most people should do with their children if they're going to ever work in your business.
In today's episode of the Hero of the Hour podcast, Mark chats with Troy Germano, owner and CEO of Germano Studios, The Hit Factory. Troy's been in the music business since 1975, and he's had some big names run through his studio. From Michael Jackson to the Rolling Stones to John Lennon, the list goes on and on. In today's episode, you'll get an exclusive look into the creative process at The Hit Factory. You'll also get to learn about the toughest part of running a family business and the importance of relationship building in the music industry. Get ready for an incredible episode. Enjoy.
Hi, I'm Mark Murphy, founder and CEO of Northeast Private Client Group and author of 3 books with my newest, The Ultimate Investment. And today I have a very special guest joining me. I'm excited because he's not only one of my best friends, he's a successful entrepreneur, Troy Germano. Troy's the owner of the Hit Factory Music Recording Studios in New York City, and the clients have recorded there since 1975, including people like John Lennon, the Rolling Stones, Stevie Wonder, Michael Jackson, Lady Gaga, Mariah Carey, the Notorious B.I.G, Paul Simon, U2, John Legend, Celine Dion, Rihanna, Eric Clapton, Kendrick Lamar, Frank Ocean, Frank Sinatra, Billy Joel, Travis Scott, Post Malone, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I could take the whole podcast, Troy, just naming the people that you've worked with. And I know, Troy, you're also active in developing analog audio speakers. You have a virtual digital professional audio plugins and studio design. So we can get into all of the stuff that's going on. But, one of the things is we've called this, our Hero of the Hour podcast. So I invite people that are either my personal heroes or people that are heroes to other people. And so the first question I have is, how do you define a hero and, who's a hero to you?
Well, first, Mark, thank you very much for having me on the podcast. It's an honor to be a part of this. Hero is a big word, and that's a word I think that you have to really understand the definition of what it is in terms of business and being an entrepreneur. And a hero to me is someone that is always there for their clients and, most importantly, always there for their staff. Doesn't matter whether you're in the recording studio business or the insurance business, any kind of finance business. The point is you want to develop your staff to be more important than yourself, because you want a legacy to continue and you want a company to grow. And as great as I am at what I do, my engineers are a big part of what keeps this constantly going, and all different artists of different genres wanting to be here. So, this is going to kind of sound corny or as if it was set up, but a hero to me is someone like you, someone that actually runs their business 25/8, not 24/7, not to the point where they don't have a life, but they've really made it a part of their life. And I think that's really what a hero is and a hero should be. And for me to be able to show up every day and be here for my clients, and equally as important, my staff. I mean, that to me, that is the definition of a hero in the business world that I live in.
One of the things I said for, a couple of decades is you've got more charisma in your pinky than most people have in their whole body. How important is that to your success?
I think, I am who I am. And I think, being mentored by my dad, who was a nightclub singer who had a few record deals in the early 60s. I think I've always been around musicians and famous people in the entertainment business. And I think, they're friends the same way if we were in the sports business and you played for the Giants and I was your son. It's the same type of thing. We're going to be around athletes and people that are people like anyone else. So I think that relationship building thing, that has always been the key from day one. People come here to these studios and we're kind of like a nomad caravan because between my father and myself, we've moved around 7 or 8 times within New York, as well as being in Miami and as well as being in London. So it's the relationships around the globe that make this business work. It's not just with the artists or the bands. It's the actual musicians that play on the records. It's the record company presidents or chairman. It's the A&R people. It's the people in the admin department of the record companies. It's the managers. It's the engineers. It's the mixers. It's everybody. So, and I think treating people with respect and giving them their due, especially when they start to become famous. And of course, sometimes you're dealing with a lot of egos in the music industry. They earn their due. So you got to be able to respect people and build a relationship. And I don't look at it as networking. I look at it as building friends on different levels, and they can rely on me to be able to work here. Yes, these studios are expensive. They always have been, but it's the relationships. And that's where the charisma comes in.
Yeah, the thing I always find fascinating is every business, my business, your business, every business has gotten just more and more competitive. Why do people pick the Hit Factory to work in rather than any other studio in the world?
Well, listen, there's a lot of studios that are great that you can work in. I think it's the recipe for success here is it's, again, the staff, the engineers, the junior engineers. It's the equipment, it's the acoustics, the sound of the room, the selection of the equipment, and the way it's curated on a day in and day out basis, really by me. I don't have a board that I bounce ideas off of. I have my young engineers, and I try to get a feel for what they think the clients would like. But this is something that I'm very in tune with, and I think that's one of the reasons people come here. You can make a record in a basement, in a garage, on a laptop, but you can't get this. This is also like being in a nightclub in terms of a hip hop artist comes in here and they're writing a song. They sometimes write these songs spontaneous on the spot. They have their lyrics of what they want to rap or sing about, but no different than being on a rock session. They need to be comfortable. So if they're able to hear the low end that you would hear in a nightclub, you can't do that at home or in a garage or just on a laptop. It doesn't work that way. But the music business has been a little bit more transient now because you can move the files on computers a lot different than when you were moving analog tape or digital tape. So I think those are the reasons, besides the success of all the records that are on the wall of the people that have been here over the years and the stories, different things that have happened over the years within the studios in different locations. I think that's why people come back here.
What is, when somebody books an engagement, they're gonna record their next great album or great song or great movie track or whatever they're going to record in the Hit Factory. What does the experience look like? So when the Rolling Stones come in or any of the artists we've talked about, or you pick anyone we mentioned or didn't mention, what does it look like? So so I booked this engagement, I'm now coming in. What does that experience look like? Because I think you create an experience for people that you can't get anywhere.
Yeah, and they're all very, very different. It's almost like a movie set to some degree, even though you're not really moving stuff, but you do move equipment around. Some clients come in with, a ton of guitars or a ton of instruments that you don't necessarily have at the studio that's personal to them. So it'll get booked by the manager, or it'll get booked by the record company or the engineer or the producer. And you're trying to now make everybody be comfortable in an environment, almost like you're overseeing the way a director oversees a film. Even though we're not really part of the creative process, some of the engineers become part of the creative process, but that really does happen with the clients and the songs that they come in with, any musicians. But again, some sessions, for example, when we're talking about pop records and how they're made, a lot of that stuff can be done last minute because a lot of it is spontaneous. But then that spontaneous thing happens on a traditional rock record as well, where musicians are coming in and they're just trying to get a feel for their place. Being comfortable is a really important thing in a recording environment. And that's a hard word to define, but it's all these different ingredients that I've kind of mentioned that kind of make that experience what it is for the artist or the band that's working in the studios. Sometimes they come in for 2, 3, 4 days, and sometimes they're here months on end. It's a little different than it was in the 80s and 90s when people would come in for a year or 2 years. Paul Simon doing Graceland, for example, he was here for 24 months. Wow. Then he came in to do Rhythm of the Saints. He was here for 27 months. Michael Jackson was at the Hit Factory in 1994 working on the History album. He was here for 11 and a half months. So that's actually a good example. So I get a phone call from Bruce Swedien, who was Michael's engineer for 30 years. And he calls me to book a couple of weeks for Michael Jackson. And I walk into my dad's office and I say, I just heard from Bruce and Michael Jackson's going to come in for 3 weeks. He goes, no, he'll be here for a year. And my father was correct. And, Michael was in 6 of our 8 rooms at the time on a daily basis with different producers and working around the clock and not wasting time. I mean, he could have made 10 records in the span of those 11 and a half months that he was here. So, when there's young engineers here and they're around people like that, or Keith Richards or Kendrick Lamar or Frank Ocean, these are experiences that they're going to remember when they're in their 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, and they reminisce on their life of the records that they made or they were a part of, even a small part. We play a small part. That the artist is the key, the song is the key, but a lot of really cool stuff happens within the studios.
Do you keep track of like how many Grammys you've won or been nominated for, or awards you've won, or gold records? Do you know how many? I
mean, I know we've won definitely somewhere between 150 to 200 Grammys. Now, we don't get the Grammy Award, but we're part of that. And there's a certificate that you can get that shows that you participated in that Grammy. We've won 9 Album of the Year awards since 1975. And we're part of 23 Diamond RIAA certified platinum records. That's 10 million sales and above in the United States. So I think, the Hit Factory historically is really on par with Abbey Road in England, which I spent a couple of years at overseeing for Universal. So, it is a very special place. And it has been even as we've moved around over the years.
One of the things, do you remember an artist that maybe the public didn't know widely, like it wasn't like a household name, and you heard them in the studio and you go, that's going to be a hit, and then they blew up?
Oh, that's happened many times. The most recent one would be Post Malone. I mean, Post Malone was in here. He was coming in quite a bit, working on his first album, Stoney, I believe it was. And that really was his breakout album. And why was he? You just knew there was something special, besides the fact that, he was a great hip hop artist. He was also a pop artist, but there was something very unique. And you could hear, I could at least hear that. I thought a few of those tracks as I'm walking down the hallway, or if I walk in and say hi, you knew it was really going to be special and it was going to connect with the public. Because a lot of times things come in here where, they're assigned to Sony, Universal, or Warner, and they don't happen. And they're really great projects and great songs. There's also luck and strategic marketing and timing, things that have to work out for any band or artist to actually succeed. But when you do see that happen and it's great, sometimes you really think you're right and it doesn't happen. I mean, music is a very subjective thing and it's a personal experience. But when it hits the masses, it has to hit them in a very targeted way.
I've asked you to tell this story 100 times because I think it's like the coolest friggin' story. But tell them the story when you were a little kid with Paul McCartney. And the photo that to me is like
you're referring to the photo in my office. So I'll try to condense it. So back in 1974, my father got John Lennon an apartment in our building on 52nd Street. And that summer, John was having Julian Lennon stay with him for the summer. And he asked me, my dad said, would you mind living with John for 3 months? And because Julian's going to be here and he doesn't have any friends. And I'm like, you're here in New York. And I'm like, sure. I was 11 and a half and Julian was 10 and a half. So one night, this is the summer of 74, the doorbell rings. And I said to John, John, who's coming up? He said, oh, Paul McCartney and his wife, Linda. And of course, I got completely psyched because Paul was always my favorite Beatle. So I said, hey, John, do you mind if I go downstairs and get this drawing that I did of Paul, of all the Yellow Submarine stuff that I'd like to give him? He said, sure, no problem. So I go downstairs and I get the drawing and come back up. And at a certain point in the evening, I say to Paul, I have this drawing that I really want to give you. So I gave it to him and I said, to Paul from Troy. And he signed it back to me. No, that's not right. It's to Troy from Paul. And he signed it and pointed a little arrow toward the actual, drawing that I did, the sketch of him. And it's something that I cherish. I mean, it's something that feels, it doesn't feel like it's 48 years ago, but it was 48 years ago, so it's something I'll never, ever forget. And it's a story that people love to hear. And that's just, that just scratches the surface, but that'll be part of the Hit Factory documentary. That'll be just one of the many, many experiences of what happened in the last, almost 50 years.
It's, probably the hard thing about doing a documentary on a place that's as famous as the Hit Factory is one of the reasons you're successful is because you have millions and millions of dollars of the latest equipment. One of the reasons you're successful is because you create a wow experience for those clients that they can't, an experience and comfort they can't get anywhere else. But the other reason, you're the keeper of the secrets. how do
It's
how do you
almost
do
like
how do you
it's
do a
almost
documentary and protect the names of your clients?
well, I think you want to tell the right stories. I mean, I'm sure I'm making a film. There's things that go on that people don't need to know about, and just
Sure.
in business too. There's just certain things that are like a confessional in a church. It's the same type thing. But no, there's ways to highlight this and have fun with it as well, and tell some gritty stories that are actually fun.
I think so, I think some of the artists would actually take pride in the gritty stories from 30 or 40 years ago, and other people never want that to be revealed again.
Yeah.
But at the end of it, even though it's a business that people can, are not dealing with the kinds of people you're dealing with every day. At the end of the day, you're a small business owner. You're running a family business.
Yeah.
What if people that don't get to hang out with Paul McCartney and Keith Richards every day? And all these and Post Malone? What would they learn about what's the toughest thing about running a business, and what's the toughest thing about running a family business?
Oh, I think this translates to any business. It's really you really get out of it what you put into it. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. And you have to monitor all aspects of it when you're a small business owner, because you don't have a human resources department, for example, and you don't have a big staff. Yeah, in our heyday, when my father was alive, we had 130 people working for us between New York and Miami. And managing that was a lot of work. And that was built from absolutely nothing, with no partners and no silent investors, nothing at all. And same thing with me. So, this was a smaller version of what the Hit Factory was. For a moment, it was Germano Studios. We've transitioned to the Hit Factory now that we're moving forward with that brand. And it'll keep expanding. And it has to expand not just with recording studios, but it has to expand digitally with products and a number of things that we're working on. And some of these things hopefully will become consistent revenue streams. That's what we try to do. But what makes it different from other studios, that's part of your question, is, again, I think it's the environment that we offer people here. And it's a consistent, curated, great sounding facility with really, really special people. And that's not necessarily just the clients. Yeah, we're very lucky to be around these clients. And a lot of times there are young artists that come in here too, or young bands, and you have to treat them and make them feel as important as Bono and U2 or Jimi Hendrix. I mean, you got to make them all feel the exact same way.
And I think if you're an aspiring band or somebody that's, on the way up, I don't think it's any coincidence that the kinds of people who are and became the artists they became, that the Hit Factory played even a small role, but a role in helping them get there. And I think that that's what a young artist would want to do. They'd want to, they don't want to be with somebody who hasn't done it. They want to be somebody who knows the formula to create success.
Again, it's a small part. And, there's hundreds of gold and platinum records here. And some of those records we did from beginning to end. And some we just did, a few days or a week or two of overdubs, or maybe they recorded the basic track here or just the vocal, or they were mixed here, or they were edited here. So again, they are small parts to an overall big project. And not everybody does record here, because it is kind of set up for major artists, but we try to get the young ones in here as much as possible, because they're equally as important. That's the future of the business. It has to be the heritage legacy artists, but it also has to be the young artists. And we see that happen quite often.
The other thing is a family business. I mean, you've got two very smart, well-educated, successful sons, one just getting out of college, one in college. Do you think the Germano legacy goes to the next generation?
I do. I think they'll both be involved in one way or another. But I also think it has to be more, again, than just studios, because I think what I do is kind of Superman cape type stuff to some degree, because I learned from, the craziest person that knew how to do this with his eyes closed. So, but I see the future of the growth and the expansion of the Hit Factory a little different than what it's been in the last 50 years, 48 years, whatever it is now. But the youngest one, I think, really would like to be a part of this, and hopefully he can come in and make a big impact.
So it seems like he'll be graduating from college on the anniversary of the 50th anniversary of the Hit Factory.
Right. Now, keep in mind, my father didn't start the Hit Factory. It was started in 1969 by a songwriter-producer that worked with Janis Joplin and the Rolling Stones and Dionne Warwick. But it was really more of his writing studio. And then my dad purchased the facility on 48th Street in 1975 and then incorporated it and made it into the Hit Factory as to what it is today. So there's a lot to do, and they would have whoever is going to help me move this forward, it's it would be big expansion, and hopefully we get it to the point where it's a lasting legacy that even lasts beyond the Germanos. That's kind of the goal.
One of the things I've also noticed is that the Hit Factory has now become like the best kept secret, but like the hottest place to throw a corporate party or a corporate event right now. What does that look like? What tell me?
Yeah, we had an event in here earlier this year through an event planner where it was somebody, a CEO of another company, wanted to have his wife's 50th birthday here, and they took over both studios for the entire day, and kind of almost made it like a ballroom, dining room, and a place for a band to perform, and they actually did that, and it worked. It was only for 13 people. I mean, we could have many people here, but you can have events here, private events, whether they be birthday parties or special business meetings, that I think people should take advantage of. It is kind of a well-kept secret, and it needs to be promoted a bit more. But that was something that I didn't know if we could, actually pull off here, that we did, and it worked out really well. And one of the Eagles actually performed for the party, as well as a relatively famous DJ that came in after the performance by the Eagle.
It's like a music museum, and then if you get some of the best artists in the world to perform there, I can't think of a place that would have a better party than that.
And the potential artist was a number of different people, and they all would have been great. But as a space for something like that, it is extremely different than being in a rented hotel ballroom. It's a completely different thing, or a nightclub or a restaurant.
How many people do you think, if you max capacity for something like that?
100.
Well, that's
we have had parties here for 120 to 140 people. Music business, playback events, when an album or a film is being released and we've worked on it and they want to use it as the center to play the music back. Sam Smith, who was recently here a couple of months ago, and he was in both studios playing back the album for tastemakers and press and social media. And he was really smart about how he did it. He did his previous album here as well, but this time he used both studios, and he moved back and forth between the rooms, and they were 45-minute meetings, and people would, there was 3 groups in each room, and he was able to kind of just navigate back and forth and be able to play it in a personal way. A lot of times when these records get played back for press or for people that are going to promote and market the record that aren't part of the record company, the artist isn't here, but he was here playing the tracks, talking about the songs, what it meant to him. And it's a really smart way to do it. And I think more and more artists will do that as time goes on.
I would say one of the great experience I had this year was I was I'm not only a friend, I've now become a client, because I recorded my book in the studio, which was a fun experience. So it's not just people recording Grammy-winning albums. There's voiceover work. There's audio books. People are like, any place that people need a world-class studio.
And a sound that is, that you can't necessarily get at home. I mean, that's the whole thing. And we've kind of gravitated toward embracing that technology as well. People should be able to do stuff on their laptops or on their home pro setups. They don't really have studios at home. Some people do, but that's a very small fraction of the population. There are bands that have studios, there are artists and engineers that have studios, but they're not major. Most of the time, they're not major studios on the level of the names that have become synonymous with recording studios.
I remember, I guess probably among the most famous voiceover guys right now is probably Morgan Freeman. And I kept saying, I thought the technology was so good. I did my own audio book. I thought I sounded like Morgan Freeman. It was the technology made it special. Yeah.
You didn't stop the whole time you were here. That week you were pretty much on for your 6, 7, 8 hours a day. So
it's a grind. I don't know.
It's a lot of work.
I don't know how. I was there for, I think, just 3 or 4 days, and just the voiceover, and I was like freaking wasted by the end of those couple of days. And I did it during the day. The thing I never understand is most of your recording with your top celebrities, they don't show up till 10, 11, 12 o'clock at night, and they record
especially
till 8 or 9 in the morning. How do you sing at 3 in the morning or 5 in the morning? How do they do that?
I mean, especially some of the hip hop artists and some of the pop artists, some of the rock artists, they show up late because I think music kind of gets created at night. It's kind of hard to do it during the daytime. I mean, there's, certain people that don't go into the vocal booth that you were in Studio 2 till 1, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. Rihanna is a perfect example. When she just recently did one of the songs, she did 2 songs for the Black Panther Wakanda Forever film, and she did one of the vocals here. I don't think she went into the live room until 3 o'clock in the morning. Mariah Carey, another one, infamous for being, a nocturnal person. She usually doesn't start in the studio till after 11 o'clock at night. And Keith Richards was like that in the 80s when the Rolling Stones did Undercover here. Mick Jagger would work during the daytime, and this went on for like 8 months. And he'd work like 9 o'clock in the morning until about 7, 8 o'clock at night. And Keith Richards would come in at 8 o'clock at night and work till 8 o'clock in the morning. And they were both working collaboratively on the record, but doing their own thing as well. So I think music is really a night thing, but look at how hard you had to work for that, those 4 or 5 days that you were in doing your voiceover work for the audiobook. Imagine having to create a recording, an album, something different. No different than being on a movie set, though, or being a painter with a blank canvas in front of your face, and you have to turn it into something special. So, obviously you're all gifted to be able to do this stuff, and we want to offer that kind of an environment where people want to be here.
It's also in the hospitality business too.
It is.
It's like you're creating a one man, one woman, one group night or 2 group nightclub every night.
Slash
they've
hotel.
got to come in and have whatever. Yeah.
So it's it's kind of the Ritz-Carlton to some degree with a creative element. I mean, that is what it is. It is that kind of experience.
Whether you mention a name or not, what kind of requests do you get for food, for alcohol, for what's the green M&Ms on the tour? Yeah.
It's not an alcohol thing. It's really a food thing. And there's special requests of, people's riders that what they would normally have if they were playing Madison Square Garden or they were playing, Yankee Stadium. So sometimes it's bizarre requests, and you try to fill those as best you possibly can. But a lot of times it's very casual. Some people come in here that you would think would be really demanding, and they're really easygoing and, very laid back, and other people are very demanding. And then eventually after you warm up to them and they warm up to you, it becomes a home. And then at the end of the record, sometimes when people are here, especially in the past, but even now, when the record's finished, it's kind of a melancholy moment because you're not going to see that artist and those producers and engineers or musicians again for, maybe never again, or maybe you'll see them in a couple of years when they work on their next record, if they happen to be in New York.
Yeah. Going back to the nightclub aspect, or throwing all the private parties, becoming this kind of hotspot for New York City parties is, most people will never be able to sing. Even the people that think they can sing can't sing at the level of, some of the artists you record.
Mm-hmm.
But by having a party in your house a party in your studio with that kind of entertainment, that experience, that's about the closest thing they're going to get to only a cool experience, but to see what really goes on.
Especially if they hire in a major artist to come perform. And, the artists now in today's world do corporate events like that all the time, private industrial parties. So it's kind of a secret way to do things that people probably don't necessarily think recording studios are capable of handling, but of course we are. So it does create, I think, a worthwhile experience.
It's you mentioned other digital and other things. Well, coming a guy who's 60 years old, I'm just learning about that now. What do you see being created than
invisible audio products, plugins, different things? Well, we already have one out now for the Germano Studios Studio One control room with a company called Waves that's based in Israel, and they're one of the most famous plugin companies. Plugins are basically virtual copies of equipment that you can have on your computers, as opposed to actually having the physical equalizer or reverb or digital delay or compressor or limiter, things that shape, crush, and change sound and enhance sound. So you want to kind of set this up for the future. So if we ever have a pandemic again, there are other revenue streams that are not just service oriented and based. I mean, I think service oriented businesses got destroyed during the pandemic. And many of them didn't survive. And it was tough for us too. I mean, even a small business like this. But we found a way, and I found a way, and the people that work here found a way. But we have to set ourselves up for different type streams.
I would say one last question I want to ask you, because I think people would know it. First of all, in the 20 years I've known you, we've never been so respectful to each other, or never been so serious in any of our interactions going forward. But I think it's important stuff. But I think that, what advice would you give, though, to people back to a family business? You talked about working with your sons. You've talked about working with your dad, who I know was your best friend.
Yeah.
And the idea is so many people are in family businesses working with their, what's the best advice? What's the hardest thing? What's the advice you'd give a father? What's the advice you'd give a child? Or a mother.
I think when you have a business that's a family business that becomes successful, I think you have to have succession plans in place at an early stage. I think they're very difficult things to bring up when people get ill or tragically their lives end. I think that's something that I think most family businesses don't figure out. And then when the patriarch or the matriarch that runs the business, if that's how it's set up, were to disappear, I think a lot of times things spiral out of control. And I think succession and estate planning is really important from day one. I really believe that once you're successful, not when you're first building your business and trying to figure out what your business is. And I think, it's a common thing to use the risk reward balance and things. But I think when you are taking risks in a small business, and it doesn't have to be in music, you have to really understand what that reward is and what you want that reward to be. You can't just think, if you build it, they will come. You have to really know what that reward is. That has to be identified. More important than the risk. And I think a lot of times people fail to do that.
I'm almost saying, even take one on the human level. It's like, I know, having, Lucas, my oldest son in our business, I find myself, I'm yelling at him all day. He's yelling at me all day, because we're both quick to anger and quick to forgive. But it's great. It's great working with him. It's great working with him every day. And
he's eventually going to do things better than you do. And there are things that you've done that maybe he'll never do the same as you. And it's the same thing with me when I was with my dad, who mentored me through this. And he was really more of an older brother than he was a dad. And I mean that affectionately. So, I hope that I do the same thing for one of my sons, if they're with me, or if they're both involved one way or another going forward. I think, one of the smartest things that my dad did for me was, when I got out of school, and the first year that I worked for him full time, there had been 5 or 6 years while I was in grade school that I worked for him part time, which I was pretty much there almost every day after school doing menial jobs, but things that you had to learn from the bottom up. That first year, he made me sit in his office, and he said, "You're going to be in meetings with me with bankers. You're going to be in meetings with me with insurance people. You're going to be in meetings with me with record company people, with artists, with musicians, and you're going to sit at the back of the couch, and you're not going to say a word, because you have one mouth and 2 ears. And I want you to listen to twice as much as you speak, but I really don't want you to talk. I want you to take in everything that I do and how I interact with these people." And that's what I did literally for a year. And, I don't know if I'll ever have the ability to do that with somebody, whether it's one of my sons or someone else that I kind of shape and, kind of mentor. But that was a crucial thing that he did. I don't know if he was the greatest delegator, but that 1 year was a big, big thing that I think most people should do with their children if they're going to ever work in your business.
I think that's amazing advice. I think the other thing too is we want, for some reason, we become a society where we want to keep our kids, like, not to have them experience any pain or any hardship. And I think so one of the things that I would wish I could have done better is, I think some of us, myself at least, I think I've made it too easy for the kids. I've tried to get them out of pain. And I think part of the things that fueled me was had to work through my own pain. And when you work so hard, I just think it's such a delicate balance, because you want them to grow up and spread their own wings, but you also don't want to see them struggle too much. I think it's hard to be their father and their boss at the same time. It's hard to be a child of the boss too.
Yeah.
So for you just have a unique perspective, because, you ran hard for a long time with your dad and built something incredibly successful. But I think you would just hope that if it's Jake or if it's Nicholas, that they take what you've created, stood on your shoulders, and took it to the next level. That's all I can ask for my kids. And I think it's all what we want for our kids. We want them to be.
And I think they're all conscientious of the points that you just made, more so than you might realize, or I might realize. And I think that it's an interesting way in a family business how to kind of work your way up the ladder. But you have to remember, on the way up, you see the same people on the way up as you see on the way down and on the way back up again. And there are going to be peaks and valleys in any business. And you want to create something special. You want to create wealth and security for people that work for you. And that's not easy to do. It's not, especially in the service business. But again, you can make the service business very successful if you really cherish those relationships. That's the key. It's like, I want to collect friends. I don't want to collect enemies. That's kind of the way I always look at this stuff. And yeah, I'm a hot-headed person. I'm not going to get on with every single client that walks in the door. But, at the end of the day, you have to be thankful that those clients walk through the door at one at a time. They all come through the door, and you want them to come through the door many, many times. And that's you got to bite your tongue sometimes.
Do you think as you get older, you have more patience or less?
No, I think sometimes it's less, but you have to kind of take a step back and, you can use that typical business phrase, being 30,000 feet above it. But it is kind of true. You have to do that occasionally and pinch yourself and realize that without the clients and without the people here, it's four walls and a pile of equipment.
I would actually, my argument in the 20 years I've known you is I've seen you go from less patient to much more patient. I think you have much more, they always say all tyrants mellow. Like I've seen stuff in the last few years that would have sent you off the deep end
right
20 years ago.
And you
kind of breathe through it.
You like my dad, always find the way to kind of see the high road and the good and always see the good in people. And, he always would say to me, if you have nothing good to say, just don't say it. And that is kind of pretty sound advice that, it's kind of old wives' tale type stuff that you can translate to any business. But at the end of the day, people are coming in, they're creatives, and they're going to have egos and they're going to have issues. And you just got to try to work around that and not take it personal. That's probably true. Maybe I've gotten better at that.
It's, I was going to say one of our core values is you want to be humble, but confident that you need people that you can do the job, that you can provide the experience for them, but humble in a way that like hubris is so ugly. And the sense that you want people to be humble, because I believe that like when you start believing your own bullshit, the world has a way of telling you're not all that, and the world has a way of like knocking you down. And so that's why I think you got to stay humble. I think there's nothing more. In fact, this was an expression I heard from Frank Ryan years ago. He used to say his idea of somebody that had no humility was he looks in the mirror every day and loves what he sees. And, they start believing their own hype.
And we deal with a lot of people like that. So you have to know how to make those people comfortable, but also do business. I think you have to be reliable. I think that, being reliable is being consistent. You're reliable. I think I'm reliable. I know I am. I know you are. And that's why I think our businesses succeed. And there are tough times. I mean, it's not always, a bouquet of flowers. It's not. I mean, business is tough. And you want to succeed in business. You also don't always necessarily want to win a popularity contest. But that's a whole.
It's a little Chaz parliamentary. Is it better to be respected or feared?
Yeah, exactly. Better to be known as being reliable, I think, and consistent.
Troy, I appreciate you taking the time out of your busy day. And, as I said, I'm excited to see what the next 50 years look like at the Hit Factory. And I can't wait to see what you wind up doing for the celebration in 2 years.
Yeah, I'm going to do something special. Yeah, for sure. And again, thank you for having me on the podcast. And, any way I can be of help to anyone, I'm here. So thank you again.
All right. Thanks, Troy.